We're going to be in 1 John chapter 2 and 3. So if you want to turn there, we'll get started. So if you would, I want to start with just a little bit of review from where we were last week. So if you think about the last half of chapter 2, kind of going through verse 27-ish. Sorry, this is bothering me. What were the two big issues we talked about in last week's class?
That was last week.
Right. Thankfully, you have your Bibles with you. The answers are there. John presents that they have to make a decision. Above all else, what are these Christians going to have to decide between? The world and God. So he presents this decision as you can't serve God and the world. You can't love God and the world. You, as Christians, will have to choose between the two. And he does give some detail that say, what would one of the benefits of choosing a life with God mean?
You have fellowship with fellow Christians who can help you walk in the light.
Yeah, you have fellowship with Christians who will help you walk in the light. That especially is emphasized in chapter 1. In chapter 2, if you go back and look, what's the benefit of being with Christ, doing the will of God? All right, so he is going to be our advocate. We talked about that idea of Christ as an attorney, an advocate for us. He knows the special words to use to speak on our behalf. And then he presents this idea that something is happening with the world. What's happening to the world? Verse 17. The world is slowly passing away. I like the word deteriorating. It is getting slowly worse and worse. The foundation is starting to crumble. Every day things are just a little bit worse than they were the day before. And what's the contrast he presents? This decision you make between God and the world. And then also, what's the contrasting situation? The world is deteriorating, is fading away. What happens with God if you stick with that choice? It abides forever. And so the choice you have before you is that, one, you can't have it both ways. You can't be with God and with the world. But you also can't be a part of this dying, deteriorating system and also get to abide forever. Fundamentally, those things can't both be true. You can't both be forever, for eternal, and also deteriorating. So pick your choice or pick your side, and you have to stick with it. All right, and there's one other, I would say, big idea that's presented in this section. Kind of introduces like a new player, a new actor, you might say, a new role. Yeah, the Antichrist. And it's always interesting to me how much popular media and television and movies like pick and pluck like relatively small ideas from Scripture and then make this really big deal about them. Often, if you see the Antichrist portrayed in some sort of television show or a movie or in a book, what's the idea? It's like the most evilest devil person ever. That it's like, I would say, this massive kind of persona. It's the evil that is almost like a caricature of evil in some ways. But how's the Antichrist presented here? One, they're among you, great. What else? Joshua?
They teach the same things, they just kind of change the meaning here and there.
Yeah, so they are teaching similar things potentially, but just changing them some. What else are they doing? They're just liars. They just don't tell the truth, and they don't tell the truth about Christ. So, for me, I think it's really important to embrace this idea of what the Bible says the Antichrist, or Antichrists, I think it's a plural concept, are. I don't think it's singular. There's not just one, and we're trying to identify the one Antichrist, whether that was Nero or Putin or Gorbachev or Reagan, or pick whichever political or social figure you want. It's been done for thousands of years at this point. It's not a singular Antichrist. It's multiple, many Antichrists. And they are all lying about Christ, who he is, and how we serve and live with him eternally. So those are the two ideas from the end of chapter 2. We're going to keep going into chapter 3 today. We'll start at 2 verse 28 and then read through 3 verse 10. I'll be reading from the ESV. And now, little children, abide in him, so that when he appears, we may have confidence and not shrink from him in shame at his coming. If you know that he is righteous, you may be sure that everyone who practices righteousness has been born of him. See what kind of love the Father has given to us, that we should be called children of God. And so we are. The reason why the world does not know us is that it did not know him. Beloved, we are God's children now, and what we will be has not yet appeared, but we know that when he appears, we shall be like him, because we shall see him as he is. And everyone who thus hopes in him purifies himself as he is pure. Everyone who makes a practice of sinning also practices lawlessness. Sin is lawlessness. You know that he appeared in order to take away sins, and in him there is no sin. No one who abides in him keeps on sinning. No one who keeps on sinning has either seen him or known him. Little children, let no one deceive you. Whoever practices righteousness is righteous as he is righteous. Whoever makes a practice of sinning is of the devil, for the devil has been sinning from the beginning. The reason the Son of God appeared was to destroy the works of the devil. No one born of God makes a practice of sinning, for God's seed abides in him, and he cannot keep on sinning because he has been born of God. By this it is evident who are the children of God and who are the children of the devil. Whoever does not practice righteousness is not of God, nor is the one who does not love his brother. All right, take just a couple minutes, make a couple notes to yourself about that, and we'll talk about that section together. All right, as you look through your notes and the first half of chapter 3, if you were going to just pluck out the main topics, what are the big rocks that you see in this section? Joshua?
The big rock I see is that you don't keep on sinning rebelliously if you're righteous with God. You're practicing acts of righteousness, and maybe occasionally you stumble, but then you turn immediately back to God.
All right, so Joshua referenced there this concept of righteousness versus sinning, and most especially, what's the word that shows up 6 times-ish in the section? Practice. This practice of righteousness versus this practice of sin. Great. What other big topics do you see? Alan?
If you keep on sinning, you don't know God. It's just a fact.
Yes.
It's a statement just like that. It's just like this. You don't know God, and you never knew God.
Yeah, so it's interesting. Throughout this book, there's this couple times where he makes these very blunt statements. If you do this, you cannot be that. And so the one in this section is, if you keep on sinning, you cannot know God. It's just, there's not kind of any other way around it. We're not going to mince words at all. If this is how you live, you can't be one with God. And you never have been. Great. Any others? When I look, were you going to say something, Jacob?
When I think of this chapter, I've always thought about that verse 1 and just the overwhelming fact that we could be considered true children of God. It's a big concept.
Yeah, so this idea that God loves us so much that he makes us his children. Something that really stuck out to me as we went through the adoption process with our younger 3 kids. The finalization that you do in court, we had the same judge for everyone, so I don't know if all judges do this or not. But one thing that judge stressed very clearly and made us affirm verbally was that we understood that adoption is different than having someone live with you. That adoption is different than fostering someone. That adoption is bringing someone into your family. And that when you bring them into your family, especially if you think about having biological children and adopted children, that once you take these children who live with you and make them your children through adoption, there's now no difference. That from the law, from the treatment, from the concepts of inheritance, from all things, there is no difference between a genetic biological child and an adopted child. And to me, that idea was so moving, especially as we think about our relationship with God and with Christ, that his love for us is not that we are children of his, but we're like second-class children. We're not just people that live with him. That instead he makes us full heirs and brothers to Christ, which is what we're told in Hebrews chapter 2. And that in order to make that possible, Christ actually suffered and died. Our brother wanted us to become his brother so much that he was willing to be sacrificed to make it possible. That is far different than him just letting us sit at his table every now and then and eat with him. We are his children. When I look at this chapter, I see 2 big ideas. One, we've talked about already, we'll talk about it some more, and that's the idea of practice. And the second is another concept that's introduced to us now, and that's the idea of lawlessness. So I want us to spend the next part of our time together. We'll go through both of those and talk about them. Before we go on, any comments or questions people have so far? Okay. When you look at practice, what do you see are the ideas about practice in this chapter or this section?
So I think if you compare it to verse 6, he uses the phrase keeps on. And I think connecting that to practice kind of brings the idea of a consistency, a habit, something that you do habitually, continually. It's something that you seek out. Or it could just be something you do by default, something that you just continue to do. But it's not like I just did this once and whoops, I'm going to turn back and do something else. It's I do this and I do it and I do it and I do it again. And it just kind of breeds this continuality to it instead of just a slip up or a mistake.
Alan?
It kind of contrasts between practice and abiding. Practice is the negative side, abiding is the positive side with God. It's interesting how it's the same type of thought. You're still practicing what God wants, but you're actually abiding in God.
So that's an interesting idea, presenting those as positive and negative, because I don't think he is calling practice in and of itself, the idea of practice is negative. But it is the means that if you want to abide with the Father, you have to practice if you want to abide with Satan, you can practice that too. That on either side of those, you practice what you want to be and what you want to become. So thinking about Evan's comments a little bit more, if you've got a baseball coach, why does he take his players out there, and why does he hit ground balls at them, his infield team? What's he trying to get them to do? Why doesn't he just say, get the ball? Danny?
Develop their skills.
So he wants to develop their skills. He recognizes that repetition is important to developing skill. What else, Chip?
It's also so that you're really comfortable in what you're doing.
So
You're confident and comfortable. So when I think about that in relation to this verse, you get really comfortable sometimes in sin, in something that you practice, something that you do all the time.
Yeah, so practice gets you comfortable with whatever you want to be. So you think about a coach who's hitting fast ground balls right past the third base line. They're down in the dirt. What's he want that third baseman to do? To get it. And what's really scary about one of those fast ground balls that's popping up on the ground like that? Get you hit in the face. You'll get a broken nose. And so he's hitting them over and over so that, as Chip said, you have confidence that, one, you know how to do it. You know where to put your hand, you know where to put your glove, you know how to do all that stuff. So the mechanics of the situation, your reaction, you're no longer thinking, okay, so now I bend down and I put the glove down and I put my hand here and I do all that. Instead, what's he want? What's the coach want? What'd you say? It's instinct. That you're practicing over and over and over. So not just that you're comfortable with the idea, but when the situation presents itself, you don't even think anymore. Because you have already decided what you're going to do. Now, you're going to get every time? Nope. It's not how it works. It's if you could just decide to always do it right and it never go wrong, you actually wouldn't need the practice. Right? The reason in sports that people practice, or in any skill that you practice, is because we can't just decide, I am going to do X perfectly. And then you're done. All right, that's it. We're ready for the game. We're ready for whatever thing we do. And so here, this idea is that we need to practice. And I like the concept that Evan mentioned of practice versus keeping on sinning. No one abides in him who keeps on sinning. Again, this implies what about our life? What's the hope that we should have because of this? The fact that he encourages practice should give you hope. Why? Andy?
It's the thing that's kind of not natural to us. It's the thing we have to train ourselves into. We need to make progress in that direction.
Yeah.
Start at the end, start at the beginning and move that direction.
Exactly. He isn't saying, listen, if you guys would just decide to do this, you'll never have any struggles again. He says, you need to practice. You need to decide that this is the way you want to be. But he also acknowledges what? Chip?
Well, I wasn't going to answer that question.
Well, you could, though.
References in the scripture.
Well, don't do that yet. He's acknowledging that we won't do it perfectly. The idea of practicing brings with it the idea of there's not an expectation of immediate and complete perfection, an understanding that you will fall short. Earlier, Joshua referenced in chapter 1 the discussion of fellowship with the Father. And that what John is presenting in this book is that they need to keep on practicing. They need to practice and work towards being one with the Father and abiding with Him, because then the Father will have fellowship with them. And overcome their sin. We aren't being asked to overcome our sin through perfection. We're asking for God to overcome our sin because we are doing practices that lead us to abide in Him such that He'll forgive us and provide salvation. Chip?
So I like that you use the word hope, because Paul writes in Romans something very sequential to the very same thing you're saying. It says that we celebrate our tribulations, or some might say persecutions in that verse. Actually, the definition is difficulties. We celebrate our difficulties. There's not a word defined this way, but I would say challenges. We should be able to celebrate our challenges. And every time I read this verse, I find myself saying to people when they ask me, well, why? Why would we celebrate those things? And he tells us, Paul says, because we know that those things bring about perseverance. And perseverance, proven character. If we prove to ourselves we can do this. And proven character gives us hope. And it's a hope that will not disappoint, because the love of God has been poured out on our behalf. So all those things fit very well with what you're saying.
Yeah. Well, there's so many passages. You look at James 1, for example, that talk about what are the benefits. Why should we rejoice in suffering? 1 Peter 2 talks about the benefits that come through suffering. What are all these points about the power of suffering? What does it do for us?
It makes you stronger.
But why does it make us stronger?
That's what you stood up for God. When you stand up and you fight against it and you win, you suffer and you still makes you stronger.
It proves that we can overcome. I used to think that I've said this story before, maybe not here, but when I lived growing up, I had a basketball hoop on the side of my house, and I would go out there in the daytime in the summer and I'd shoot basketball, play myself, basically. And there was a kid up the street who became my best friend, but I always wondered if I could beat him in horse or 21 or whatever we play, or one-on-one. Well, you're never going to find that out until you play him. And after having done it a few times, I was getting to the point where I was confident I could beat him in basketball. And then he grew up a couple years later, got taller, and he smashed me pretty good. But that's
Thankfully, you had
the
baseball.
time when I had confidence.
Yeah.
I've proven to myself that I'm probably a better shot at this little phase of my life at that age. And I think that's the same way it is with this concept that we're talking about. Why do we celebrate those things? Why does it give it? Why do we rejoice in our tribulations? Because of what we gain from overcoming. Confidence that we can do this again. And we may not do it every time. That's the point you were making. But we could still have confidence that, I could have, I know I can overcome this. I disappointed with myself this time and I didn't. But yeah.
Christy, what were you going to say?
That's the same word as we use confidence. We have that confidence that we can.
Yeah. So I've used this example a couple of times, so forgive me if it's annoying to you. It's my best example. The word bulletproof, the idea of being bulletproof goes back to in England, when they first started coming out with firearms, they would take the armorers at the Tower of London. They made the primary suits of armor for all of the King of England and his people. They would fire a gun at the armor before they gave it to the guy who was going to wear it. Being bulletproof, that phrase looks at, they would go and look at the piece of armor, and when I give Chip his armor, I'm the armorer, I give Chip his armor, he looks at it, and over the breastplate, where the heart is, there should be a dent, not a hole. Because that mark is the bulletproof. It is the proof mark that shows if someone shoots a gun at this piece of armor, especially this really important place where my heart is, you can have confidence bullet's not going through. They did that because they wanted, for years, soldiers who wore suits of armor had little to be concerned about. Arrows did not do them great harm. Bullets, however, did. They wanted them to go into battle with confidence. And so they started putting these bulletproof marks in their suits of armor ahead of time so they could know. Angela Duckworth is an author these days. She wrote a book called Grit. I highly recommend you read it, by the way. It is a fantastic book. The easiest thing to liken grit to is resilience and that idea. But one of the main concepts she talks about in that is that resilient people look back at times when they have been successful, especially through difficulty, and they reflect on that and say, I made it through this before. This is like that. I can have confidence that I can make it through again. I've survived before. I can make it through now. The idea of whatever doesn't kill me makes me stronger. So the refining power of trials that we're talking about is that we can look back on them and we can say, the Lord kept me. I was faithful to him. He will keep me now, and I can be faithful to him now. It's the ability to look back and have confidence about the future. So, when we think about the structure of John, of 1 John, just before this, we had the idea of antichrists. Kind of just after this, and then involved in it also, there's going to be lawlessness, which we haven't talked about yet. Kind of in between them, he brings up this idea of practice. Like, why is practice sandwiched between these ideas of the antichrists and lawlessness?
It's kind of this gray area. You don't really know until you know what they do.
What'd you say?
You don't really know whether they're righteous or antichrist or evil by what they do and how they perform. So you kind of have to figure it out.
You have to figure it out. The idea of practicing tells us what? Andy?
It's an active choice. You chose it.
Yeah, so someone who is practicing, they have made an active choice. I love that. When you think about the active choices involved in practice, this could be to serve the Lord, or this could be to do a sport, or this could be, pick what you need to practice. What does practicing for something tell you? What goes into practicing for something? Wayne?
I think of the word intentionality, that it can still hit you in the face, but I'm going to get in front of it anyway. The idea that I might not succeed, but my mindset is I'm not going to quit.
All right, so this idea of intentionality, I like that. So I'll use myself as an example. I'm not currently a good example of this, so bear with me. Once upon a time, I was swimming a lot. It was great exercise. The problem was the practice that I like to go to. There's a couple problems. Number one, it started at 5 a.m. Number two, it was downtown at Centennial Sportsplex. And then there's you can think of all of the problems that surround that. So when I wanted to go swim and I wanted to go practice, if I woke up at 4:20 and my bag wasn't packed, do you think I was going? No, because I'd lay there and be like, I didn't pack my bag last night. I don't even know if I own swim trunks. I had many pairs. But in that moment, I was questioning if they even still existed, right? So how did I get over that? If I wanted to go practice the next morning, what did I do the night before? Prepared. I would get all my stuff together. I would make certain it was by the door. Okay, then another problem was if it was cold outside and there was frost on my car, I just couldn't do it. I could not get myself to get out of a warm bed and go get in a frosty car. So what did I do? Or I parked the car in the garage so that it wasn't frosted in the morning. I made all of these choices. And so when someone is seeking to learn or to improve or to grow, what are the types of choices they make in practice? They make decisions that enable what they want to become, right? So that can look like I make preparation. I take the things I have and I get them prepared in a specific spot. But even before I did that, I actually had to go potentially procure the things that I needed in order to do that. Sometimes it's the effort you put into, I would have to go to sleep before, 10 o'clock at night if I wanted to get up at 4 to go swim, right? All of these choices you make. So when he tells us here that those that are practicing righteousness will be with the righteous one, what are all the different things he is telling them they need to do? It's really easy when we think about this in a sports metaphor often, but what do we need to do in our practice if we're going to achieve these things? Joshua?
Sometimes it requires getting accountability.
Great. So finding someone who will help you in your practice, seeing another brother or sister as an enabler in a good way. Right? What other sorts of ideas would help you practice righteousness? Christy?
You have to know what it is.
Yeah, so you have to know what it is.
You have to know what the word is. You have to study. You have to look. And I think about this in music. When you practice, you have to have the instrument. You have to know how to read music. You have to, try over and over and over again. You're not going to get it right the first time. When you practice something, like you were saying before, anytime you practice anything, you get better at it because when you're doing it over and over and over again, you know a little bit more. You understand a little bit more. You're a little bit more comfortable with what you're doing. You are a little more confident with what you're doing. That's, for me, what's practice, when you practice something.
Yeah, over and over. Difficult, dedicated, focused practice. Danny, what were you saying? Nothing? In verse 7, he says, "Little children, let no one deceive you." In this idea of practice, what is the deceit he is warning them about? What's he concerned about?
Taking your confidence away, someone telling you that you're not going to be able to do it, somebody that's making you feel like this is not the road I should be on.
Yeah, so someone who is taking this from you. I love that idea. I think it's especially important when you think about the Antichrist from the end of chapter 2. What else do you see? What do we think he's worried about them being deceived about? Look at the rest of verse 7.
Deceived into start practicing sin when they know it's not. That's the key. People are persuasive when they practice something to justify it. And we justify it all the time.
I think about this as when Christ was talking to his apostles, how did he tell them to identify a tree? You look at its fruit. And if it doesn't have the fruit, it's not that type of tree. And so I think this idea of practice is the same idea. What he's telling them, let no one deceive you, whoever practice righteousness is righteous as he is righteous. That if you're developing a relationship with someone and they are practicing righteousness, well, that means they're righteous. The opposite is true also. If they aren't practicing righteousness, they are not righteous. So at the end of chapter 2, when he's warning them about these antichrists that are teaching against what they have learned, against the gospel, they are lying about Christ, those folks, prior brethren in many cases, are not righteous because of what? They aren't practicing righteousness. Right? This is what he's trying to get them to make the leap towards is, I don't get to look at Alan and say well, he has been righteous in the past. This idea of practice is an ongoing thing. And I think that's where the deceit lies here, is that they may be tempted to look at their relationship with someone and say, well, like, I mean, he's been a pretty good guy. Like, I've known him for a long time. All those things. No, like, what is his current status? What is his ongoing relationship with righteousness versus the devil? All right. Now, the last thing we'll talk about before we go into lawlessness. To me, he presents two competing ideas. What does he talk about practicing here? Talk about practicing two things.
Sin versus righteousness.
Yeah, you can practice sin or you can practice righteousness. It's interesting to me that he tells them, hey, if you're going to be righteous, you have to practice righteousness. By the way, you also have to not practice sin. I think of sin and righteousness as being opposed. That if I'm doing one, I can't be doing the other. But is that how we actually live our life? Are you perfectly righteous? I mean, I'm not. I've never been. Are you completely sinful? I don't know many people, but it's partly because of who I hang out with, but I don't even know of many people that I would say are complete, like 100% evil. They certainly exist. But he's bringing this idea that sometimes what do people who want to be righteous do? Still sin a little. And actually, kind of on purpose. Right? That's the idea here. Keeps on sinning versus practices righteousness. That you can't make this leap if you are still trying to do both. If you're trying to be righteous, but sometimes I still kind of keep my sin around, because I think David's done a good job talking about this in some lessons. Like, I'm comfortable with my sin. I know what that is. That actually I enjoy it a little bit. And so I just kind of keep it around while I also am trying to be righteous over here. You can't do both of those at the same time. You have to choose which of them you're going to do. And in those that you spend time with, you have to inspect if they are making the choice to do both of those or do either of those. And that you can't say, well, he's pursuing righteousness like 70% of the time. Sure, he still does some practicing of sin. I can still work with him. That's the issue that these antichrists bring, is that they are frequently talking about faith, about God, about belief, and about righteousness. But they're bringing in a little bit of other stuff that corrupts it. You can't have the good, you can't have the righteousness that you want to pursue while also having this little 20% of pursuing sin on the side. Does that idea make sense? Questions? All right, let's talk about this idea of lawlessness. So when he goes into this section, verse 4, everyone who makes a practice of sinning also practices lawlessness. Sin is lawlessness. The word lawlessness, what do you think of when you think of lawlessness?
Breaking the law.
Okay, breaking the law. But if someone's breaking the law, what exists? The law. So necessarily just the fact that someone broke the law it's not actually lawless. If you said, hey, that is a lawless place, what do you mean?
No rules.
There's absolutely no rules. It's anarchy. Do you think of sin as anarchy? Do you think of sin as being a place where anything goes? I don't know if I often think about it that way. But here, when he's saying that sin is lawlessness, it's this idea that the way of God is righteousness. God's law is about being righteous. And when we sin, we are casting off completely his law. We are throwing him aside and saying, I don't want to be part of that. I don't want to be part of you. That's what anarchists do. That's what lawless places are filled with, is people who say, I know there could be a law here, but I don't want one. I'm going to do what I want to do. I'm rejecting the idea. The concept of law, I reject. Chip?
You said what I was going to say. We were created by God to do good works, but when we say, well, I'm going to do what I want, then you're practicing lawlessness. The only law that exists is the law in your own mind. I make my rules. And if everybody exists that way, you make your own rules, and I make my own rules, and Christy makes her own rules, and everybody in this building makes their own rules. How do we know what's right? Who defines what's right? And so when we look at righteousness, that's defined by having a standard that says what's right. And when we say that, well, maybe that doesn't apply to today's world. I think that's antichrist behavior. That's speech. That's antichrist speech. When you say, oh, but the rules back then don't apply.
Yeah, so it's this idea of there's a law. Are you willing to follow it or not? If you're not, that's lawlessness. And I think our studies on Wednesday nights lately that talk about Jehu are a great example of this. Jehu followed what God wanted him to do for quite some time and did quite a bit as a result. He was pretty active in doing what God told him to do. But then what do we see at the end of Jehu's story? What'd you say, Alan? He didn't actually follow God. All of that time, he was doing what he wanted to do. And then when what he wanted to do did not align with God, all of a sudden, he wasn't so interested in it. That's why he was destroyed. That idea of lawlessness is not that, someone is living in complete anarchy. In every way, they are completely rebelling against God. Jehu was lawless in this regard, even though much of his life and much of his time was spent looking like he was a servant of the Father. When we are dealing with lawlessness, we aren't simply saying, well, are they in complete anarchy and complete rebellion? Sin and its presence is lawlessness. It's a rejection of submission to the will of God. The last thing I wanted to say, well, not the very last thing, but the last thing I will say is that I do think this section is presenting a progression, that there is sin, there is practicing sin, leads to lawlessness, leads to being antichrist. That he's presenting a progression for them, I believe, that is they are dealing with brethren or former brethren who are now kind of in this antichrist label or moniker. Well, I think he's kind of warning them that if they are allowing sin to abide with them, they are lawless, and that's going to lead them to become more of these antichrists. It's a warning about a progression as part of what I think he's doing here. Thanks so much for your precipitation. It rained. For your participation. Jared should be back next week.